welcome to the game of the day from the Grand Prix tournament currently happening in Zug, Switzerland. My name's Nick Murphy, with me as always International Master Lorin D'Costa. Before we start, just to let you know that we've got new Chess on Toast DVDs out. Check them out at www.chessontoast.com. So Lorin, what are we going to see from this game from round 2?
So the game we're going to look at is by one of my favourite ever players. Never really hit the complete heights that he could have done, but he's a Russian maverick, we say, and his name is Alexander Morozevich. Do you know who he is?
I've met him.
Oh really? Oh, you can take it one square. Always one further than Munich. Cheers. Now Morozevich ranked in top 10, top 15 in the world. And he burst onto the scene in the early 90s when he was young, winning one of the London tournaments with a huge score, something like 10 wins out of 11 games or something. And he really set his sort of stamp on the chess world back in those days. And he's known kind of for his really crazy attacking chess, and this game is actually no different. Now, it actually ended in a draw, but that does not mean it was not exciting. So, the opening he played as white against the Azerbaijani Grandmaster Mamedyarov, also of course a top player, was this variation called the Grunfeld defense. Now, I think we actually analysed one of this, Nick, in the candidates
games. I
can't
remember
who it was, but it doesn't look like a very or junior friendly opening, because what you're actually allowing is for white to take the centre like this, and after black's best move, knight takes c3, you even strengthen white's centre. But the point is, after bishop g7, black can now play moves like c5, knight c6 and queen a5 to try and attack these pawns. So we'll leave that discussion to another day, or go back to our videos on the candidates where we did discuss it.
Yeah.
But here we see Morozevich tries something a little bit different. He played knight f3 and black played bishop g7. So whatever opening it is, you know that the rules of development are still the same. You should castle and try and attack the centre with one of your pawns. So black has one here, probably is going to play c5 and try and open up that bishop. So that's the general idea of the Grunfeld in a nutshell.
Right.
So white's got so many moves here again. Moving the bishop out to f4, or maybe a bit further to g5. They're the common moves. But in fact, Morozevich played one of the craziest moves here. He went h4. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, that just looks... It looks like it's the sort of move that if I played, you'd be sort of tutting and shaking your head, going, "What on earth are you doing, Nick?"
Well, I'd probably say to you, was it a touch move incident where you accidentally touched the pawn? Were you reaching for your coke and you accidentally?
It seems like it goes against all the principles we've talked about. You know, you want to try and avoid moving those pawns because they might become the protection of your king if you castle it. You're not developing your pieces. You're not gaining control of the centre. Sort of against everything that we've talked about.
Well, the point is, how does black actually stop this idea of h5? You might think, well, isn't that square actually covered anyway by this?
Protected by two pieces.
Well, let's say
attacked by one.
If black castles, h5 happens. Black does not want to do that, because that would open up his king, wouldn't it? So why can't he take with a knight? Well, if he takes with a knight, he actually draws the knight away from this square on d5, doesn't he?
Yeah.
So white's now free to win a pawn, either with pawn takes or possibly even taking with the knight. So the idea is actually to sort of do this sort of wing attack on an early stage, because the black knight on f6 is a little bit overloaded, isn't it?
Yeah.
So why can't black play h5? Well, of course he can, but now white plays bishop g5, and this is a slightly different version of with these pawns included, because black's best move normally is to go knight e4 here, but after pawn takes d5, knight takes g5, knight takes g5, this pawn actually defends the knight on g5 here.
Right.
So black can't do anything. Black's normal move is to go e6, and the queen would attack the knight on g5. You can imagine if this pawn here was back on h7 and that pawn was back here on h2, that knight would be attacked, wouldn't it?
Yes, it'd have to sort of do something to defend it.
And that's right, and it would be a double attack on the knight and the pawn here, which is the main variation from the bishop g5 line. But with the pawns included here, it actually helps white to have this pawn defending the knight. So what I'm trying to say is, after h4, black can't really just go h5, because after this move bishop g5, black is under a little bit of pressure on these squares, isn't he? If you imagine that all of white's pieces are trained onto d5, and black doesn't really want to do d takes c4, because e4 happens, the bishop comes out towards c4, white has the centre, and all white had to do was play a slightly risky move h4, which hasn't totally damaged his position, has it?
No, so Morozevich wasn't just making a terrible blunder.
No, he wasn't. As you said, if you did it, I would have just thought it was a touch move. But because Morozevich did it, it's a genius move, So what we say is that when your opponent attacks on the wing, the best way is to counter in the centre. And Mamedyarov did exactly that. He played c5 straight away. And this is the kind of normal antidote to any of these wing moves, like pawn moves on the side, is what I mean. So now White doesn't really want to go h5 because Black's got a lot of action in the centre, maybe taking and going e5 himself. In fact, we can lead to a really crazy position where h6 happens and we have to go back, and both sides are now being attacked. Both sides have pieces that are being attacked, and they've now got to go backwards, and d4, and I've got no idea what's going on. But I really don't like White's position because, above all else, he's allowed Black the centre.
Yes.
And we haven't done anything in the centre at all. So however many moves Black lost with this bishop, I still don't really think that this is good for White to be doing. So White has to be careful by playing these kind of... it looks like, I should do the same as him.
Even though White's slightly better in development, he's got to use more time up saving that knight, in which point, and then Black can start developing his pieces.
That's right. If we like here, then knight c6 threatens e4.
And suddenly Black's doing well.
And his pawn h6 isn't really that good. Yeah, exactly. So after c5, Morozevich took on a c5. I think it's important to note that Black now cannot push with a d4, because White has enough pieces defending it, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And Black has only the queen attacking d4. So the pawn is being attacked, but knight a6, now that also contravenes another rule, which is putting your pieces towards the centre. But, of course, the top players know when they can break the rules. And also, I think that Black Mamedyarov decided, well, I'm going to break the rules, because he's made a huge breaking of the rule here with h4. Plus, knight a6 actually attacks the pawn on c5, so it can't be that bad, can it?
No, it seems fairly sensible.
So Morozevich, in his wily ways, decided to crack on with h5. Well, probably because he thought, well, I've moved the pawn now, so I might as well get going.
I'm sort of committed, I may as well go all in.
It looks as though White can just win a pawn with c takes d5, but after knight takes c5, we see Black's compensation, which actually goes back to our round 1 video we did between Karawan and Rajabov, where it appears that Black just lost the pawn. But actually, this is quite a dangerous position for White. Because if Black can go queen a5 and knight e4 and really get onto the c3 knight, see how the bishop would be released?
Yeah,
there would be a lovely
have
pin.
3 pieces attacking it.
That's right. And White's move h4 might start to look a bit silly. So Morozevich decided, well, I'm all in, to use the poker term. So I'm just going to crack on with h5. And I'm pretty sure that after knight takes h5, well, we will never know. Most people would just take on d5 and win the pawn, which I think looks quite nice. But probably he might have fancied sacking the exchange as well, just to smash open everything and then go c takes d5.
Yeah, you can always expect Morozevich to play something exciting, and he's true here.
Something like this. I mean, I'm not sure if he would have done that, but
it's a possibility.
It's a possibility that Mamedyarov as Black did not want to see. So instead he just castled, which appears to walk into the eye of the storm. But after he took, which way do you think Black should take back with the
Well, we always talk about taking towards the centre, but my instinct here is that would just open up the file for the white rook. When if we took with the f pawn, we'd open the file for our own rook, and while not having too many problems.
That's right. I think this would be far too dangerous to allow White to play this open h4. I mean, here White could probably just take on d5.
Another one of those opening sort of rules that we've found a particular place where it can be where the rule can be broken.
That's right. So in fact he took with the f pawn, which helps to open up his rook and stop White. So White does have some advantages in the fact that his rook's got an open file now towards h7, but that doesn't mean he's winning yet, because his queen's still on d1 and it's got to get towards the king's side.
He's still not very developed.
So bishop h6, now that's a standard way to try and trade off this fianchettoed bishop. But the problem is that Black's actually ahead in development. So after these moves, Black regained the pawn. White's got to be careful that Black's not going to win the pawn in c5 and be a pawn ahead. So instead he decided to try and win the c-pawn back. But what happened was this led to a series of exchanges. Now, I think at this moment, the rook, the well-travelled rook, has gone to h6, h4, and now across to c4. probably not really looking for a kingside attack, is he?
No, it's unusual to see the rook moved so much before even, say, the F1 bishops come off its opening square.
Well, not only that, I think it's good to say that it's not even able to move, which is quite amazing, really.
Again, it's going against, we've talked time and time again about developing your pieces. Yet again, one of our rules being broken.
So
only if you're a super grandmaster are you allowed to break chess on toast rules. Otherwise, no.
Otherwise, no. Yeah. So Nick, don't be trying this at home, right? So b6, and this was another nice move because now the black bishop wants to come out here and attack the rook on c4. So excellent play. And if now, for example, e3, which is just playable, I think bishop a6, rook d4, attacking the queen, queen c8. I think the position is roughly equal as we're going to see in the game. White's king is not so bad here, but I still think that the position is roughly equal. And this is kind of what happened in the game, where b4 happened, and black decided to swap queens, which was quite wise, bearing in mind that white had showed this aggressive intent earlier in the game. Bishop a6, another nice intermezzo, so not moving the knight that's being attacked, but counter-attacking on the rook. And another nice move by Morozevich, e3. So the question is, why did black not take the rook on?
Because now when you take the bishop back, it's check, so you're taking with tempo. You've got to move the king, and you win an extra piece.
That's right. So white now has 2 pieces for the rook, and is 2 pieces generally good for the rook?
I would say that was pretty good, especially definitely.
It isn't.
They're nice active pieces in the centre as well.
That's right. So 2 pieces, even though black has a pawn for it, is still a good trade. So white would be quite happy with that. So black did retreat, and white had to move the rook. The pieces came off like this, and all black needs to do is get his rooks into the game. So he played rook c to f to c8, sorry. And why that rook was it looks as though...
say, why wouldn't you move the other one? That seemed much better.
Well, rook
your
c8...
F rook's already doing something.
That's right, rook c8 appeared to be quite good, but maybe he was a bit concerned about knight b5, which attacks the pawn, and white would like to do the same thing over here to win 2 knights for the rook. Although even here, I'm not quite sure what happens now, because white would actually lose the knight if this happened. So I'm not quite sure. Maybe he just thought that he went rook fc8 because he might want to use the a pawn to go forward, and he would therefore need the support of the rook behind it. That's all I can really... and also he came up with a nice manoeuvre, which is knight f8. Maybe that was the reason why, to vacate the f8 square.
Oh, I see.
So the knight can now... Which is quite deep-sighted, isn't it, really?
Definitely, yeah. It's not something
Did we say he was a good player, actually? Oh, we did. Okay. Right, just checking. So knight f4, and that prevents black going knight e6, but now the black rook came into the game. And rooks like open files, don't they? They especially like an infiltration point into the opponent's camp. And here rook c2 was an excellent move, attacking the pawn. Luckily for white, though, he has good coordination between his pieces. That means all the pieces are defending each other and all kind of working well with each other. So this shouldn't really be too much of a problem for white. And in fact, rook a2 threatened to bring the other rook into the game. So the rooks came off like this, and in fact they agreed a draw in this position. So there you go.
Well, that's still quite an interesting draw and a very exciting game from round 2. So thanks very much for that, Lorin. As I say, check out chessondose.com for information about our DVDs. But we'll be back with more games from the Grand Prix very soon.